Hi, my name is Jamie, and for those that don't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of MossPure, and I'm a chemical and environmental engineer. And one of the biggest questions that I get asked, which is such an amazing question actually, is what is the difference between MossPure's living moss and the other moss walls that you see out and about or on the internet? Well, the answer is simple. MossPure is the world's only company to use the 100% living plant. And the other companies that you see, the other moss walls that you see out and about, are actually not living and are treated with toxic chemicals, and they just don't last. And I'll go through that in a bit. How I created MossPure was that I was in a startup competition at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in June 2020, and I noticed that the green wall market had a huge gap. These other living walls, for example, where companies and florists, for example, would go to different companies in different office buildings, take a plant and just put it onto a wall and charge the customer, only to return 3 days later when the plant dies to add water and then to replace it. And then, I started to notice that there was a lot of preserved moss walls out there, which is not even living. And basically what they do here is, for example, they use something called reindeer moss in most cases, and reindeer moss isn't even a type of plant. It's not even a type of moss either. It's a type of fungus. And how it is in nature when it is alive, because it's no longer living right now, it's actually cream colored like this, but it's really hard, like a skeleton. So what they have to do to preserve the moss, these manufacturers, is, and these manufacturers are usually overseas, either in China or Europe, for example. And basically what they do is they take moss and they add chemicals to it so it's no longer living. And then they have to add softening agents to this hard, this hard product in order for it to be used as an art material for preserved moss companies. So now they're using chemicals to kill the moss. They're using chemicals to soften the moss. Then they use all these different dyes and solvents, these harsh and flammable dyes and solvents that are just nasty and toxic to make it, an artistic piece, I guess. And what people don't realize is that this stuff, one, smells horribly. It smells like chemicals because all the chemicals that were used to treat this process and to make this preserved moss is now off-gassing and emitting into your air. So this isn't healthy for you. It's not environmentally friendly at all, actually. The other big thing is that this stuff falls apart immediately. You can already see it's fading in color. It's already falling apart all over me. It's getting onto my hands and the dyes are coming off onto my hands. This stuff is just very low quality and just not a good product to use. And you're basically going to have to replace this. So a lot of these florist companies, these artists will basically go on site, just glue this to a wall, and then within a year, you're going to have to replace this several times and pay for it to be replaced. So I saw customers getting frustrated. This stuff isn't real. It's fake. These companies were saying that the products were real, but they weren't. And they still do that. And not only that, a lot of the products get mold and dust on them. A lot of these preserved moss companies will tell you that you have to dust your moss, which is weird. What happens is because it's been treated with so many chemicals, it actually becomes like a piece of carpet from a chemical standpoint and a material standpoint, and it collects dust and mold, and it's just nasty. And this is just nasty. So what's the difference between MossPure's living moss and that other stuff? That other stuff is fake. It's no longer living. It doesn't last. And MossPure uses, and it's the only company in the world to use 100% living moss. This is the real plant. This isn't something that we use, this isn't something that you can find in your garden or anything like that, or with gardening. This is a certain species and subspecies of moss that we use. And I spent over a year developing this product after I won at MIT, working with customers, working on the science and testing it out with labs in air quality testing to make it the world's only living moss air filter. So we cannot just take moss from outdoors and stick it onto a frame like they're doing with this dead moss. We actually have to, there's a whole process. We actually have to build out a patent pending living environment for the moss. It basically supplies all the nutrients and food supplies for the moss that it needs. But what happens is our invention and our patent pending science is working with our live species of moss, and it's becoming an air filter for your space. Basically, the moss is using these bad chemicals in your air and moisture as its food source. So it's taking in, like a vacuum, all of these bad chemicals, the moisture in your air. Even if you live in a dry environment, you still have moisture in your air. And then what happens is it's keeping itself alive by taking in these chemicals, and it's becoming an ultimate air filter for you. But at the other time, this living environment that we've created, that we have actually hid within, this frame. So one thing that I wanted to do was, I didn't want to make Moss Pure look like a scientific device, even though it is. I wanted it to be really aesthetically pleasing. And so we hide all of the science within this frame here. But within this, there's a lot of complex science. We're not just adding moss to a frame. Even, the glue, so-called glue that we have to use to bind the moss to the living environment. I create that myself. I formulated it myself. I'm a chemical engineer. You can't use a glue on moss. It will kill it. On the live moss, it will kill it. So there's a lot that goes into our process. It's really labor intensive, and it's not the same product as this fake stuff. And a lot of times people get confused. They try to replace our products or look at pricing between this product and this product, which shouldn't really be done, because this is a much cheaper and lower quality product. It's going to be a lot less in pricing. Whereas you're going to get the real plant. There's no watering, sunlight, or maintenance needed, because like I said, that science that we're building is creating this and making this work. And it lasts in our design. You don't have to throw this out or replace it like you're going to have to with this fake stuff or even the living walls. This will last, and it has lasted. And it's also a scientifically certified air filter. We're the only company in the world that has air emissions testing from a US certified laboratory. That is huge, because when I was first developing Moss Pure as an environmental engineer, a lot of these moss companies were trying to say that their products were air filters. Here in the United States, you cannot say that your product is an air filter without passing certified air quality testing. And not only does Moss Pure have that, and we're the only company in the world to do that, each square foot of this is capturing 200 ppm of carbon dioxide daily and 1,576,590 particles of pollutants. So if you have allergies, for example, we make a lot of these for children's hospitals. I have allergies. I personally developed this and scientifically developed this to capture allergies, anything with asthma or respiratory illnesses or even cancer. Those are the pollutants that it targets, because I designed it for that. And so these are great products. So my question to you is, what do you want? Do you want the fake stuff that everyone has that is not real and smells and just doesn't last? Or do you want the real stuff, the real moss? That's not a rhetorical question. You just know the answer. You want the real stuff. You want the quality stuff. So get Moss Pure.